Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this is going to be a really interesting session. We had a huge number of registrations for this session, so I expect to hear that kind of beep or a little bit more as we're going in. This is a very broad-ranging topic looking at accessible content. Web is massively important, obviously, and the accessibility industry has spent so long on things like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, making sure that people know it's really important to make your website accessible, that sometimes you may be forgiven for thinking, what about the rest of the things that you do in digital communications in your organizations? It could be internal documents that you're sending around, this PowerPoint that I'm presenting on today. It could be the PDFs that you generate from those for your staff, for your customers. It could be all of your social media. And also increasingly, especially because of some things that the government have been doing to try and push accessibility beyond the web, a lot of people in the marketing world are beginning to kind of wake up to the idea of making sure that accessibility is a fundamental part of all of the messaging that they do throughout the campaigns that they have. So that's what we're about today. We're trying to make sure that when you communicate, your message gets across to everybody and doesn't leave anyone out, whilst also staying on brand. So a lot of really interesting things here, especially for people who are more in that sort of communication, sort of marketing world. It's not just what the message is, it's how it's communicated, it's the creativity, all of those sorts of things. And these are going to be fundamental to what we're doing. There's also a lot of tools out there that can help. So we're going to be kind of touching on a number of those tools that you probably already have on your machines. And we're going to end up by just looking at, if you like, how you can get trained if you need some more. So, but I wanted to start off just by, if you like, looking at some of the questions that have come through when people signed up for this on Eventbrite. It's not just, how do I do this technically, as a designer, as a developer, as a content author, but it's also, how do we embed this in our organization? Sometimes maybe even it's actually not us ourselves who are creating our content. It's actually a supplier of ours who is in there. And so how do we make sure that everybody is bringing their best game to the party when it comes to accessibility? And as I say, the reason that this is so important is it's because of the user journeys. And what I wanted to do was just sort of share a couple of user journeys with you that hopefully you may relate to, one for customers and one for staff. So as a customer, if we just think about what we do, how do we use digital content? And I wanted to take the example that is obviously very, very current at the moment, which is the vaccination, which is happening. So these are all of the things. I happen to be old enough to have had both vaccinations now, so I've been through the entire process. And I was looking at all of those steps. Boris stands up on the telly and says that we need to do this sort of thing. That needs to be accessible. And then the information is there on the website and social media about how and when to get a vaccine. There's then a website that you need to book. It's a website, not an app, but it could have been an app. They then send you an email and a text to confirm you've booked. And then when you get there on the day, there are lots of signs that tell you what line you should be in, how social distancing works there. And when you get to the front of the line, they check you off on a list, and they then ask you to sign a form to say that you're not allergic to any of the aspects of the vaccine. And then finally, once you've got the shot in your arm, you get a card in your hand to say you've been vaccinated, and if it's the first one, that your second appointment is a particular point. Every single step of that needs to be available to every single person for them to have a good vaccination experience. That's what we're talking about today. It's across the whole lot. Or looking at it from another perspective, how about your staff who have a disability within your organization? Again, a lot of people think about accessibility as something which is on the web and is on their external website. They forget that they actually may have staff who have a disability. So they completely miss what's happening there. So And I'm guessing that if you are a member of staff who has a disability, you really don't care very much about the accessibility of the company's website that you're working for. That's not the most important thing for you. The most important thing is what you do in your day-to-day job. So it's things like the information on the internet, all of the documents being shared backwards and forwards between people. These are the things that are absolutely key for people to be able to do their jobs. None of us can do our jobs without things like Office in either G Suite, Microsoft, Open, whatever type of tool you use to create those documents and share those documents around. That needs to work for everyone. And it needs to work across the whole employee journey. So it's everything from information, sort of town hall sessions, maybe a podcast from the CEO talking about what's important this month, or a video. All of these things need to be as accessible as everything else. So before we sort of jump into what we have in terms of how to make that happen, I wanted to turn it over to a quick Slido for a moment. So I don't know if you've used Slido before. If you've been on these webinars, you certainly will. If you go to slido.com or sli.do, you will find a screen that looks rather like this. And here you need to enter a code. And the code is the international standard that we created. So 30071. And that is the code to put into the box here. And then what happens is that if you start answering these questions about which of these information types are things that are really important to you, then we can get an idea of where everyone's at. So if you go to slido.com, put in 30071, and then hopefully soon, yeah, as I say, the first person has come through with, so video, emails, landing pages, and PDFs are important to them. Really useful just to get a kind of a flavor for what of these types is most important to you. So I'll just leave you with that for a minute or so. This is actually what I was hoping. So emails are there at 81%, right at the top. So emails are things that are really important in your day-to-day jobs. But is it something that you really think about in terms of accessibility all of the time? You know, as somebody who runs a company who does this, I can say that we do think about it, but it's not at the forefront of our mind all of the time. So it's massively important that we actually align where we place our attention when it comes to accessibility with what is important to us in terms of the things that we do. So yeah, thank you. About 40 people have filled this in already. Emails are there, obviously things like websites, but a lot around PDFs and Office documents. And then we've got things like social media, presentations, and those sorts of things. So thank you very much. That's really, really helpful, because that enables me to understand that you're definitely wanting to hear what I've got in my presentation today. So what I want to do is to look through across how all of these things play together. And especially when it comes to how you are perceived by your public, you probably have campaigns that go across multiple aspects of these. So it could be that you've got audio adverts or podcasts, that you've got video there on YouTube. Potentially, if you're in the advertising space, you may be using those video posters on bus stops that you probably aren't standing next to these days quite so much as you used to. But print posters, print adverts, massively important as things are going through. And then banner adverts on websites to try and draw people in your direction. Things like social media and email to enable people to understand that you've got something to offer, normally on your website and the landing pages on it. And then oftentimes things will come through as a PDF. So effectively, if you are trying to get your messages out to people, there is a huge panoply of different types of technology, different types of opportunities and challenges that come across all of these. And to get your message across, you need to bring people on the journey with you. So one of the things I wanted to do before kind of diving into a few of these was to actually respond to some of the questions that were coming when people were registering for this. So people were saying, we want to know how to do it, but we also want to know how to kind of run this in our organizations. And actually, that's what we term embedding, and that's the sort of thing that we're kind of famous for, if you like, in the accessibility world. That's ISO 30071 Part 1 that I was talking about earlier, is all about how to get your whole organization doing this well, because everybody in the organization knows what they need to do to make this work. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea as to how this might work, if you like, across a campaign. So a campaign normally starts with a brief. You know, this is the sort of message that we want to get out there. This is oftentimes what we're trying to sell as a concept. It gets sent out to an agency a lot of the time to say, okay, do you have any ideas about doing this really creatively? They respond to it and say, we could do it like this. And then it may be that you have 4 agencies pitching and you choose one, and then production happens and then materials come through. At every stage in this, accessibility should be thought about. And we have been training campaign managers in our clients and account managers and creatives in their agencies massively over the last few months. So we're doing a huge amount of this at the moment. And it's providing us with a lot of really interesting things, some of which I'm going to share with you, as I say, this afternoon. So, but that, if you like, is how you try and get this into your process. It's about at every step, from the original brief, we do expect this to be accessible. So if you're coming up with some ideas, we're going to want to see that in your creative sort of response. And then when ideas come through, you need to check to see whether or not they're going to work for everybody before they're actually created. So, and then just checking to make sure that everybody in the process doesn't waste any time or money by doing things in a way that will actually disenfranchise people and will then potentially need to be, if you like, grafted on afterwards. That's one of the reasons why the UK government at the moment is so wanting to make sure that everybody really gets this and gets this to a much deeper level than we're just doing our website. So hopefully that gives you a few ideas for how to kind of get this into your organization. So, but I want to go through, I'm going to give you 2 tips on 4 of these different things, and I'm then going to give you a bonus couple of tips on one that we think is kind of fun and interesting and kind of shows what might happen when hopefully things come out of lockdown. We wanted to start with video, because video is the thing which is massively taking off. You know, it used to be that if we were trying to get a message out, so we would do a blog. You'll have seen our HiHub is coming out, and the major component on HiHub is lots of our videos of these sorts of webinars. This is a great way of enabling people to understand very quickly in a deep way the sort of things that they might want to be doing. And so it's a great way of getting your messaging across. So how is this all going to work with video? So each of these, I'm going to have one insight, and then I'm going to have a couple of tips. So here's the first insight when it comes to video. So this is a pie chart of the breakdown of people with different types of disability in the UK. And you don't need to kind of consume it all. The key things here is to see why people behave in the accessibility world of video in the way they do. Audio description, which is the thing that people do for people who are blind, especially, but other people with vision impairments as well, generally works and is necessary for about 2% of people with a disability. If you compare that to captions, captions are actually really important for about 25% of the people in any country with a disability. It could be people who are hard of hearing, people with a learning difficulty, or have difficulty reading words on the screen, sometimes, so dyslexia, low reading age, They want that ability to hear what I'm saying, if you like, in this, and read the captions at the same time. We know because we've been doing this for a very long time. We also know because this is what you ask of us in that little access needs part when you sign up for these webinars. It's the reason that we have captions and we don't have full audio description for everything that we do all of the time. Although for anybody who has difficulty seeing any of the slides today, I will be reading out the important stuff, so you won't be missing anything. The other key thing is if that's 25% of people with a disability, it's also 75% of people with disabilities or no disability who are watching mobile videos. So watching stuff on their phones, 75% of people actually have them on mute. That means that they cannot get your messages unless there are captions there. It's one of the reasons why captions are massively important for a huge number of organizations these days. So, but the other thing to note here as well is the transcripts. So literally writing down all of the things that are in the video is even better. Those are massively useful for everyone, including people who could watch the video but don't want to. They don't have the time. If this is an hour-long session and actually something that I'm going to say in half an hour is the thing that you want, trying to find that in the video would take you a while. But trying to find that in the transcript underneath the video, as you'll see is there on HiHub, is really, really quick. You just find in your browser and you get to it immediately. So transcripts are good for all. So a couple of tips on if you're doing videos to try and make sure your messages come through to everybody. People know that captions are really useful. If they're provided, closed captions, which are the ones that you can turn on, turn off, that's what we've got today, are great, especially because they can be provided in multiple languages. Not live, but afterwards, if you wanted one of our videos in a different language, all we have to do is to change the captions. There is another option though, which is open captions. So these are, if you like, the embedded captions that are burnt in. This means you can't turn them on or off, but it does mean that there doesn't need to be a component that can show the captions at the same time as the video there, and which is going to become really important when we get to social. But here's the key thing. It's really, really important to get the quality right. So on the right of the screen here, we have some actual stuff from what my team have been doing over the last month to try and make sure that all of our webinars are up on our new site. At the top, you have Otter.ai. That is one of those automated systems that was trying to understand what I was saying back in January. And what we have here is actually, this is something from France, is RG-AA4-ACT. WCAG, that most of you who know anything about accessibility on the call will know, is spelt like it is at the bottom, WCAG, has come out as WCHANG. These are the sorts of things that automation gets wrong. In fact, these are the sorts of things that so we have My Clear Text who are providing our captions today. I sent them this presentation at the start of today so that they could look at it and actually put into their systems the actual terms that I'm going to use. So therefore, hopefully anyone who's following along on captions will be following along with terms that come out well rather than, if you like, spelled phonetically. These are the sorts of things that you really should be paying attention to when it comes to video. The next thing, if you like, I've got one thing that people may know something about and one thing that people won't very much. So I started out my career 10 years at the BBC, and it's a really interesting place to start off in sort of technology and media, because you understand how what people want, what people don't want, because they tell you all of the time. The #1 complaint the BBC receive every year is contained in this video. So I'm going to play this for you now.
Here on BBC One now, the BBC News at 9 o'clock from Peter Sissons.
Jerry Adams says British spies bugged his secret talks with the IRA.
Okay, so the complaint was not the IRA, for those of you who have memories back that far. The complaint was that pulsating music underneath all of the time. When you try and make something exciting, you put music under it. To make it really exciting, you put music with a driving beat. And oftentimes the news isn't particularly exciting. So the BBC needed to do something to make it more interesting. And the key thing that they found all of the time was that a lot of people who are older find it hard to hear what Peter Sissons was saying there because of that background music underneath. When people's hearing starts going later in life, it doesn't go across the whole spectrum at the same rate. They lose their high frequency, which is where people speak, and they keep their low frequency. So anything in low frequency can completely obliterate what you can hear otherwise. So it's just a key thing to be thinking about. Captions are great, but actually your sound mix is a really useful thing to look at as well. Okay, we're going to move on quickly. Social media. So what can I say about social media and accessibility, which will give you just kind of like a taster in this area? Well, the first thing is back to what we were talking about earlier, which is cross-channel journeys. So here's a couple of journeys that we did for one of our clients. So a lot of the time, their careers journey was from LinkedIn through to their careers site. Both of those needed to be accessible for people to be able to apply for jobs. Or, for example, if you were banking with HSBC in this case, you might get an email that takes you to their Facebook, that then takes you to their YouTube. These are the sorts of things that we do without really thinking about, okay, actually, there are different rules for accessibility on each of these things, because the key thing about this is that HSBC, in this case, do not own Facebook. They do not own YouTube. So therefore, they are working within the rules, if you like, the capabilities of those social platforms. So you need to make sure that the platforms are good for accessibility, but that you use their features well. So I'll just give you a couple of these. I say we have a whole training that goes all the way through everything, including TikTok and anything kind of strange coming out of China. You know, we've been there and we've had a look about how you might or might not be able to use it from an accessibility point of view. Twitter's pretty good. It was a little bit slow to get going, but they're really picking up the pace of making sure that the platform itself is accessible. If somebody was coming to it, for example, who was blind using a screen reader, it's a fairly good experience these days, if the content on it, which is the thing that would be created by all of us, is good. So a few things about that. First thing, Twitter, short. Everything's brief, 280 characters or you're dead. So therefore, a lot of abbreviations happen. And abbreviations are one of those things that people know in accessibility and aren't always a good idea. Do everybody know what your abbreviations are? When you're trying to cram a lot into a message, is it readable for all of your people? Camel case is the other thing. So hashtags get read out by screen readers as one word because a hashtag can't have any spaces in it. So if you just have it all as lowercase, a screen reader will take it as one word and pronounce it really, really badly. The screen readers these days have worked out that actually, okay, there aren't any spaces, but if you have capital letters at the start of every word in that hashtag, they will take that information as well. And also, people tend to, on occasions, use kind of emojis and all sorts of other things in their tweets. Emojis are absolutely fine when it comes to accessibility. Most screen readers for blind people will read out if it's a smiley face or whatever. But also people try and get really creative and use kind of odd characters, which were actually created for maths. A lot of the time. So you can see here in this, you've got a number of different fonts happening here. One that looks kind of Germanic, one that looks kind of more cursive. These are not cursive fonts. These are extensions to the standard font, if you like, and they are voiced by a screen reader as maths. So don't use those. Another thing is images. I say most social media has got the ability for you to put in alt text for images. If somebody can't see the image, they can have it read out to them if you put that in there yourself. And then the other thing is captions are absolutely fine as well. You can create your video, upload it, you can upload your caption file and it will work. If you're using Twitter as your means of uploading things onto Twitter. We don't. I don't know any organization of any size that doesn't. We use Hootsuite. People use all sorts of different tools. So you've got to make sure that the tools that you use to put stuff on your social media enable you to get the best out of the accessibility features of that social media. And certainly when it comes to videos and Twitter, that's one of the reasons why it's good to be burning in captions, because that way you can't get it wrong, if you like. Here's Instagram, rather similar, rather different. It's all images here. Actually, you would think that people who are blind would hate Instagram because it's loads of images, but actually this is Blind Dad UK who tends to love it, but it says it's not massively easy to navigate. The key thing here is it's all images, so you have to put your alt text in. They've tried to make it better for you, to give you automated alt text, and it doesn't really work very well. As I say, if you want to laugh one of these days, upload a photo and see what it thinks that photo is. It's pretty poor quality. And it's exactly the same when it comes to their auto captions. It's a good start, but don't rely on it, because unfortunately it comes out in a way often that misses the point you were trying to make. Cool. Okay, we're kind of blitzing on through a number of things here, but hopefully you're keeping up, and this is providing sort of useful stuff for you. As I say, we're going to have lots of time for questions at the end, so please get those ready, so you can pop them in the chat and Pete will pick them up for me. That's the best way of letting us know what you would like to ask. But this is the one that you really wanted. This is email. And the key thing here is, how are we going to deal with this? So the insight, it's really good that you had that at the top of your list, because even though the law is less clear regarding the accessibility of emails than websites, you won't, for example, have found anybody who got sued for not having an accessible email. It's actually arguably more important for you, because the whole purpose of sending an email these days, most of the time, is to send people a link to a website, whether that's a link for your customers to go to your external website, or a link for your staff to go to where on your intranet a particular document is being shared, and you can sort of have a look at it and edit it, that sort of thing. Click-through only works if people can use your email. So it's massively important. And according to The Guardian, about 1 in every £5 spent in the UK is for those who are older than 65. So you want to make sure that you're not just thinking accessibility equals websites equals people with a disability. You're also thinking who else might be needing us to make sure that our emails really take their needs into account. So I'm going to give you one tip that may be familiar to some of you, one that probably isn't. So the first one, thinking about those older people. So if you send an email to my mum, like this thing on the right there, for her to buy me a shirt for my birthday, she cannot read a lot of the text on that screen. It's just not big enough for her. And she does read it on her screen. Actually, I think this figure is about a year or so old now. 53% of people read emails on their phone. Certainly I do. I'm guessing you do as well. So getting the font size right, making sure that you've got a responsively designed email, not just a responsively designed website, is massively important. But here's the other thing, and actually this is kind of fun. So we pushed out our email for this particular webinar last week to a lot of people who've come to our previous ones. And when it arrived with one of the people who I think is on the call today, it looked a little bit like this, because he had dark mode turned on his machine, and he was looking at his email on his iPhone in Outlook. And I don't know if you can make it out very well there, but our Hassell inclusion logo is our lovely circles and then black text on what is effectively a black background. And he was like, isn't there some irony there? Yes, there is. That's what not to do. We've been spending so much of our time actually helping our clients get over these particular hurdles. We hadn't got around to doing it for all of our emails yet. So live what you do. These will be going out from next week, and hopefully everything should work very well in dark mode. I don't know why that particular person had dark mode turned on to his machine, on his phone, but I do know that a lot of people who have disabilities, especially around vision impairments or autism, when we do user testing, really love these sort of color schemes. So dark mode, is it an accessibility aid or a cool thing that is done to kind of, for everybody to rest your eyes? Well, it's both. And your emails need to kind of work with this. So not like that on the left. I've got a reference here, and as I say, if you go to HiHub, when this deck is available on there as a video in the future, you'll be able to take down the link there. It's a brilliant email, not done by us, done by litmus.com, about how to make sure you're doing dark mode well. But the really interesting thing is it all depends on the tools that you use. That's the thing that I wanted to kind of bring out of this, is that most people we talk to about email, it's I can do this, and then it gets handed over to the technical people, and I have no idea what happens then. And actually, a lot of the stuff which works or doesn't work is to do with those technical people and the systems that they use. So we use something called Active Campaign for all of our stuff. And actually, it doesn't allow us to do the things that are in this email. This is how we would want things to be. We already have a version of the Hassell inclusion logo, which is white text on a dark background. That's how we wanted to do it. And literally the idea is that if you look at the email through dark mode, it actually comes through and the logo is swapped. That isn't possible on Active Campaign at the moment for issues that I won't go into. It's all to do with lots of really quite complicated HTML. So the closest we've been able to do is to do a version of the logo that has a white outline around it. For people who are looking at it on a white background, they don't see that at all. It's our logo as usual. But for those who are on dark mode, at least they can now pick out what's happening there. We're not happy with that from a branding perspective, but it's the best we can do at the moment whilst we work out what the tech issues are. So just a few thoughts there. Cool. So we're going to look at Office documents and PDFs next. Just a few things about these. So why couldn't you just include a light background in the image file itself? Yeah, great question, James. We tried it. It looked awful. If I'm looking at a screen where everything is black and everything is white text on it, and then I put a white out box behind our logo, it looks like our logo is broken. That's how my branding brain goes, and that's our designers as well. So it's about trying to do things in a way that actually upholds our brand and allows people that flexibility. Yeah, as I say, this is the key thing. It's not just about making things accessible. It's about making things beautiful in all of these different ways that people use technology. And just because we do things on a white background, it doesn't mean that that's the way people might want to consume it. So it's trying to work out the most elegant, the most beautiful way of doing that. Great question. So PDFs, the key thing about PDFs is that you don't create a PDF in a product. You create a PDF from a source format. So it could be a Google Doc or a Word file or a PowerPoint, InDesign. It could even be the only PDFs that we know that are created. They're created by tools that do them for bank statements, those sorts of things. So effectively, you've got a template which is created in one of these things, and then information gets put into it. Actually, our scorecard works a little bit like that. So the key thing is to try and make sure that the source document is accessible itself before you export as PDF. And the great thing is that certainly all of the Microsoft suite have got awards for putting in accessibility checkers in the tool itself. So you can literally take any document that you're working on and put it through that accessibility checker. It's not a fundamental part of Google Docs at the moment, unfortunately, but there is an add-on available. Its quality is questionable, I would say. That's the kind of feedback out there. We don't use Google's stuff ourselves at Hassell Inclusion. We've moved to Microsoft for this exact reason, really, that they get accessibility in a way which is a lot more embedded than what was coming out of Google at the moment, at least. This will find some issues. Things like missing alt text is the key thing that it finds, but things like clear language or the kind of structuring of documents and things like that, you can still get wrong in the document itself. But it's a really useful tool. And if you're not using it at the moment, I'd suggest that you do, because it will find the problems, or at least some of them, for you. And then if you can fix them there, then when you export to PDF, if then you suddenly think, oh, hold on a second, there was a typo in it, and I go back to the source document, fix the typo, and go through to the PDF again, it's all working well. If you fix the PDF and then need to change it, you need to then redo all of the fixes that you did. But that is that other scenario, if you like. So a lot of people were saying, well, what happens if an agency is doing it for me? You know, can I fix what they've done? Well, yes, but this is the question to ask. Do you know how to make your PDFs accessible? It's not a complicated question, it's kind of simple, but we found that this completely changes the way organizations relate to each other. If you don't ask the question, you have no idea, and they don't know if you care too much. If you do ask the question, one of two things will happen. They'll either light up and they'll go, oh, we're brilliant at that. You know, we went on this training course, everybody knows how to do this, it's going to be brilliant. Or they kind of go, oh, that's a good question. Can I get back to you on that? And then they kind of probably don't, hoping that you forgot it. So if they don't get back to you, ask a week again later to check. And you can use Adobe Acrobat Pro to check yourself. So it has an accessibility checker in it that you can run on a PDF, and it will tell you whether or not the PDF is okay. It's quite a complicated thing. It's not something I can do in sort of a couple of minutes on a call like this. It's why we have a whole day training on, it's actually a whole workshop to do this on documents to really enable organizations to understand how this works. But you can test things in Adobe Pro and fix things in there as well. And one last little thing, just a little bonus. I know we're all digital at the moment. Who cares about paper, eh? You know, newspapers, you know, posters, all of the rest of it. We're not out there in the real world, so we don't need them. But that will change. We will be back. And print is massively important. You know, in most countries, stupidly, I think, from my particular perspective, the law really doesn't say very much about paper. If you get your PDF wrong, you can be sued. If you print the PDF out in a completely inaccessible way and then give it to somebody, you can't. That makes no sense because of this. Digital content is completely customizable. We've just been talking about dark mode. I can change colors on websites, all of that sort of stuff. It's great. Print isn't. Once you've got it on paper, that's it. There ain't nothing more you can do with it other than alternative formats, you know, big text, all of these sorts of things. So for your customers, anything you print, I think you need to think more about accessibility than less. You know, if I couldn't read the information on that card at the vaccine center, I would be slowing the line down completely because somebody would need to read all of that out to me. And I don't think they had necessarily thought about that. So it's really important to get this sort of stuff right. So choice of color, you know, there's a lot done on the web for this. Color contrast between the text and the background for different sizes of fonts. The interesting thing is nobody really looked at that particularly that much when it came to print. There is a really great document from the UK Association of Accessible Formats, but that is quite, you know, it must be 12 point or more and in Arial. You know, again, it doesn't really help for anything creative. So we've done a lot of stuff with organizations to say, actually, when you're printing things, it's really important not just to be thinking about the colors and things, but also where somebody would be standing if they are reading this thing. It's different if you've got a pop-up poster than a poster on a billboard a long way over there with maybe a bad light on it that is flickering, so you can't read it very well. If you need to know what's on that poster, the person who created the poster should have been thinking about that. And just one last fun thing. So yeah, these are the kind of the video poster sort of screens that we can see everywhere. These are a really interesting sort of opportunity and challenge. You know, is this video or is this a poster? No one's quite sure. You know, nothing has kind of caught up when it comes to the law yet. So, but if you're doing any of this stuff, we've done quite a lot of really interesting thinking with some of our clients. So get in touch and we can kind of help you. So last bit about how you embed this in how you work. You know, the key things here are these. First thing is train your staff. It sounds crazy, but if you think of the number of people who work on your website, even in a huge company, that is probably less than 100. In that same company, every single person is creating content all of the time. So what we find is that the fixation on let's get our web team trained and completely forgetting everybody else, which is probably about 10 times the size of that team, who are dealing with these things all of the time. That makes no sense to us at all. So we have 3 courses that we're running a lot at the moment. Campaign managers, so it's very much about, if you like, the sort of stuff we've been looking at today, but going deeper into how do you manage this? How do you actually govern the whole process of the creation of really interesting sort of campaigns that can go across all of these media? Accessibility for content authors, which is very much about, okay, you're putting this stuff into a content management system for your website. You're putting this stuff into Twitter, into YouTube. How do we make sure practically that the people who do that entry know what they're doing and can be part of the, if you like, the team who are trying to make sure everything is accessible? And we're running a huge amount of PDF workshops at the moment with organizations who are like, okay, I've no idea how this works, because it is different from the web. There's no HTML involved in PDFs. It's all a very, very different thing. The tools that you use are different. And so, as I say, if you need any of those, please get in contact with us and we'd be delighted to train your people. The other thing, as we were saying, is that it could be your suppliers. So you need to require accessibility. Someone was asking a question around, how do we get them to do this? And the first thing is, if you don't ask, you don't get. It has to be in your briefs, in your contracts. It needs to be something that you say, if you are going to be doing this for us rather than us, then we want you to make sure that everything is accessible. The other thing is, as we've had with numerous organizations that we've worked with, they've actually had that in place, but they haven't known how to test what's come back. And on occasions, what we found is digital agencies have said, oh yeah, we'll do that WCAG thing. And then they've forgotten it. The client was relying on them to get this right. The client didn't know this accessibility stuff themselves, and they were actually got into all sorts of problems by their agency. So it's not enough for you to say, you must do it, agency. You need to find a way of either the agency proving it to you or you checking on the agency. That's the way it works. And as I say, this is the sort of stuff, if this sounds interesting, the whole kind of procurement angle, we had a whole hour on this a couple of months ago. So as I say, if you sign up to HiHub, you'll be able to get a much kind of deeper look at this. As I say, if you want the very quick version, there is a poster, which is a PDF, which is accessible and tagged. That's how they term it in PDF world. The other thing is, somebody asked us a really interesting question. How do we ensure suppliers can actually do this? We want an accessibility MOT that we can get them to do to prove that if they are doing accessibility on our behalf in content, that they're doing it right. That's that international standard I was talking about. So 30071 Part 1 is all about how, if you like, to check an organization to see if they're any good at accessibility. It's all of the things that they need to get right. And we've created a scorecard that allows any organization to just self-assess themselves and to say in 20 minutes, okay, how well are we doing? Are we good or not? You could do that for your own organization. You could also ask your suppliers to do it for theirs and show you the results. That is, if you like, that MOT that can be a really useful thing to do.